In Unit 8, going to look at these things. We've got level 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is the laws affecting how solicitation of clients and customers. Also, employment contracts with affiliated licensees. Those are versions of agency agreements too. It's between you and your firm. And then some level 2, the MLS, and cooperating with other brokerages within the MLS, as well as antitrust laws. Antitrust laws have to do with what we are allowed to say. When people ask us, what is the industry standard commission rate? Spoiler alert, there is no such thing. We better not give them a number. If they ask that question, we should say, there is no standard. It's all negotiable. And then level 3, we're going to get into a little bit of math. It should be the easiest math because it's all about that money that you make. We touched on it a little bit, I think, last week. The general requirements for agency contracts and what listing and buyer agency stuff looks like. Okay, general requirements. Here's what an agency agreement has to have in it. Bare bones. At least must be signed by all parties. Who are the parties in an agency agreement? Let's say a listing agreement. Who are the parties in a listing agreement? The seller and who? Yeah, the firm. You who work for the firm, right? It's between the seller and the firm, and you sign on your firm's behalf. Perfect. Yeah. So it's not a listing until it's been signed by you and the seller. But who's the seller? How many people could be the seller? If it's an estate sale, the person died and they had three grown children, all of whom are married, how many signatures do you need on that listing agreement? 3 grown children got left the property in the estate, and they are all married. You bet. 6 signatures. That's a lot to fit on one line. That's why we have an additional signatures addendum to use, but it could be a lot. And so you need to know, as a listing agent, broker, who do I need to do this presentation for? Are they all here? Oh, is someone making a decision? Okay, I hope they all agree. When it comes to an estate, by the way, inevitably, they do not all agree. Some of them probably didn't even want to sell it. Some of them want to go ahead and sell it and cash out and get their piece. Some of them want to hang on to it while it appreciates, or maybe live there for free or cheap. So you frequently, in an estate situation, are dealing with people, with owners who have different goals. That can get tricky, especially when it's a spouse of one of them. Why is it always that person who's the troublemaker? Not even one of the actual children of the deceased, but the spouse of one of the children of the deceased that causes all the trouble. Agency agreements must be signed by everybody. Include the broker's license number, the firm. Let me say that, the firm license number. Now, you'll see in the Google Drive, because that's where I've put, if I haven't, I will, the listing agreement and the buyer agency agreement for you to look through. The back page has a place for both, but your license number, that's what I'm trying to say. You, the broker, the one who actually did the work, because your firm may not have been the reason you got that listing. They might not have hired you because they knew they were happy with your firm. They probably hired you because of the work you did to convince them they should trust you. Your firm happens just to be kind of along for the ride. Now, to be fair, sometimes they do hire you because of the firm you're with, but more likely, more commonly, they hire you because you earned it, darn it, because you're just that good, and they trust you. And even if you went to a different firm, they'd still come because of you, right? So it's got to be your license number in that agreement, in that agency agreement. Absolutely. In case you screw up, in case they need to report you, they have the license number. They can make sure that you are actually licensed, right? And all agency agreements must have a definite termination date. That's a good one to write down. In particular, they can't last forever. It should be chapter 8. Yeah. All agency agreements have to expire. They all have to have an expiration date. As much as we would like it to be the case, once someone works with us once, they don't have to work with us every other time in their whole life that they want to buy or sell. Gotta have a termination, and it's negotiable. I usually put a year. Sometimes they call me on it. Sometimes they say, could we do this for less? But it's been a long time since they've done that. When it comes, when they trust you, repeat referral business, when they know that you're in it for their best interest, not your own, then those things don't seem to matter in their minds quite so much. Not as big a deal. And then all agency agreements must have non-discrimination provisions. In other words, we don't care what anybody looks like, believes in, where they came from. Money is green. We're not going to deny somebody the right to buy, own, sell real estate because of the protected classes, right? And here's what it looks like. When you go through an agency agreement, this first one we looked at, signed by all parties, last page has the place for everybody's signatures. There's the one for 2 sellers. If you have more than 2 sellers, then you use an addendum to add the others. And then a little bit further down the page that you can't see is where we sign. We, the broker, signs on this page as well. There's where we put our license number, right down there where we also sign. Our broker in charge does not sign the agency agreement. The firm does not have to sign. You are signing on behalf of the firm because you are a general agent on behalf of your firm. And then there's the expiration. This one is a little earlier, a little further toward the beginning of the agreement, maybe page 2 or so, page 1 or 2. And, well, there's provision 1. So, yeah, expiration date must terminate 11:59 p.m. on fill in the blank. And then it also has this little symbol. Any kind of advertising you do, business card, yard sign, website, Facebook page, any social media, if you were to ever be questioned about having violated fair housing rules, and it's not crazy to think that you could be accused, doesn't mean that you did it or that they were even right. Some people don't understand what the rules and laws are. But if you're ever called into question, it's going to go better for you if you have proof and you can show them, the ones who are investigating you, that you have this logo, that you adhere to these provisions. If you don't have this logo anywhere in sight in anything that you do, the authorities who are investigating, the real estate commission, for instance, might just think, well, gosh, does she even care about this stuff? Is this a sign that she's not giving this priority? And then here's what that language looks like in all the agency agreements, pulled straight out of it. The agent, parentheses firm, shall conduct all brokerage activities in regard to this agreement without respect to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familial status of anybody, the party or prospective party. And also realtors, if you are a member of the Realtor Association, you have 2 more. An ethical duty in addition to these to conduct these activities without respect also to the sexual orientation or gender identity of anybody, party or prospective party. So the 7 federally protected classes are mentioned first, and then the 2 additional protected classes through the Realtor Association are included there too. They could have left that out because under the category of sex in the federal classes, they have included gender identity and sexual orientation. In other words, give everybody a fair shot at owning real estate, selling real estate. We don't care about any of this stuff with regard. Now, can we choose not to sell to somebody in one of these classes? Only if it's because they can't afford it, but not because they're in the class, right? It's about the money. It's about affording it, being able to qualify for the loan if that's what you're doing, but not because they're in a class. That is big problem, as it should be. Number one, you can get in trouble with the real estate commission. Number one, you're a big jerk. Number two, you get in trouble with the real estate commission. Number three, whatever the fines normally are, times it by 3. Treble the fines for someone guilty of a protected class violation, fair housing violation. The listing agreement. We're dealing with a seller here. Why do we even use a listing agreement? If that seller had the option to list their house with you verbally, orally, then why wouldn't they? I would just weed down to all the agents that'll do it without it being in writing, and I'd see if any of them are worth a hoot, and I would pick one of them, because then I'm not obligated. But there is no such thing as oral listing agreements. A listing agreement is in place to see that the agent and the firm have some sort of protection. When you list a house, it's going to depend on the agent, the broker, as to what they do to get that property sold and what the market is like. In a tougher market where houses are not so in limited supply, when it's going to be really challenging to get something sold, which is coming. I don't think this year, but it's coming. You're going to need to do more to get it sold as a broker. Right now, and in the last several years, any broker who listed and sold a property in 3 minutes and bragged about it, I got a headache from rolling my eyes so hard, because I'm like, you and me and a monkey could all do about the same level. It's just going to sell because that's the market we're in. I can appreciate you taking credit because that's how you grow your business, but did you really do all that great? Okay, good for you, but they're selling themselves kind of right now, and they still kind of are, just because of the market. But a listing agreement is there so that we get paid as we should. Is it there to protect the client? Sort of, but it's mostly there so we as the firm, as the broker, have documentation in place and proof that we had an agreement with that seller to get paid. Because how much do you think it costs to list a property? That was my original train of thought there. Well, it could involve all sorts of things. It could involve professional photos. How much is that? $150, $200? How many are you taking? How many do you want them to take? How big is the property? Doesn't even have to be that big of a house. And does that include drone? No. Add that on. Maybe another $100 to $200. Does that include putting it in good condition in order to take good photos? Staging. Anybody heard of staging? Sometimes you got to pay for staging. Sometimes they'll pay for some of it. Sometimes you have to pay for some of it. In a competitive market, different market than we're in now, if the house is trashed, yeah, good point, Greg. But the problem with that is, Greg makes a good point, and I'm a do-it-yourself guy too. I'm all about buying that drone. I have one and taking the pictures myself. But just because you own it, you're not ready yet. You got to take the Part 107 drone test, which means studying for about a 12-hour class to take the test. PSI gives it, by the way. They give lots of different tests. That's another one they give. You got to have that in order to use drone footage that you take for marketing, for commercial purposes. So, yeah, but once you have all that done, I'm all about that life. But on the other hand, if you're just a machine getting a bunch of listings and cranking them out, maybe you don't want to take the time to do it yourself, right? Yeah, that's the point we're getting at here. Carrie sums it up. Yeah, it can cost, pretty much is out of your pocket. Everything, it's gross commissions earned. It's expenses all on you, right? Staging could be, it depends on what it is. Gosh, it could be anything. Could be a couple hundred. It could be thousands of dollars. Depends on how bad the property is and how much it needs. Pictures. Oh, measuring. Probably don't want to do that yourself, at least in the beginning. And if it's a really big fancy house, the good part about paying someone else to measure it is they're better at it than you are, better at it than I am, because they do it all the time. And they're going to make a nice little floor plan for you. And if you pay extra, they'll make an even more elaborate floor plan with room dimensions all spelled out. Otherwise, they're going to just give you the footprint and say, here's the heated square footage of this thing. And that could be $150. Well, do you want to market it on the internet, on social media? You can do paid marketing through Facebook, through Instagram. That could be a budget of any number of things, $1 per day, $50 per day. It could be $1,000 by the time you're all done. If it takes a while to sell some of this stuff, right now, the average days on some stuff that I've seen, about 10 to 12 days on market. We're in the holiday season, but in a typical balanced market, which we're still not in yet, it might be 70, 80, 90, 120 days on the market that it takes something to sell. And now we're getting into some monthly fees. All this stuff is one and done, right? Unless it goes so long on the market that you need to update the pictures because you don't want to show pictures with snow and no leaves on the trees because you took them in January, but it's still for sale in April or May. Maybe you want to refresh the photos, right? But now we're getting into some monthly stuff too. And let's not forget, you already have to be a member of the MLS, so that involves money too. And then the old school stuff. Flyers, mailers, open houses. Does that seller think that open houses are important? They might. And do you want to tell them that they're not? Probably not, because while you probably aren't going to sell the house itself with the open house, it does potentially grow your business. It does give you the opportunity to meet more buyers, more sellers. And in the process, make the current seller feel like you're working hard to get their house sold. You can tell them, I probably won't sell your house with this. The odds are slim. However, I'll try. I'm all about doing everything it takes. But that costs money too. Food, maybe giveaway. Maybe you do a broker open house where you do one catered just to brokers themselves and another one open to the public the next day or a different day. Maybe you have giveaways. All of this depends on the market, how hard it is, how much competition there is for this price point, this neighborhood, this type of house. How much work do you have to put in to beat out the other ones that are available? Right now, not that much because there's not a lot available. But all this is stuff, and it's all the broker's expense. Infrequently, the firm will help you. They rarely will. Because that's just the deal, guys. 100% commission, all your expenses. So you better believe it. If we're shelling out this money in the beginning and it may or may not even sell, hopefully it does, but if it doesn't, you're still out this money. Nice to have something in writing that says, hey, seller, you said you'd pay me. I have it right here in writing. And it is required. In order to list a property, it must be in writing. Yep. Okay, so to get us paid, property owner hires the firm to market, to procure buyers. And that's what we're explaining to them on that listing appointment. On the listing appointment, we're there to meet them, to help win them over, to tell them what they need to do to their house to get it right, and to advise them on the price it's going to take to sell it. Because pricing strategy is another important factor in this listing process. It's not enough just to say, yeah, okay, let's just try this. I want to sell it for $500,000. Why? Well, because that's going to give me enough money to do this and that and the other. Okay, well, is that based on research? No, just the research of my bank account because I know that's what it's going to take for me to be happy. Well, we also need to see what buyers have been willing to pay for similar property. Now, you're of course saying all this nicer. I like to sound like a big jerk when I'm explaining to you because it's more fun. But in real life, you're very politely, nicely saying, look, guys, there's a difference between what it's worth and what it costs you. Remember those value words we learned a few weeks ago? What the seller spent on that deck doesn't mean it's worth that much more than the house with no deck. Oh, you chose to spend $25,000 on the deck because it has gold-plated screws and extra rare wood panels. Oh, and your own sweat equity doesn't matter. How much do houses sell for with decks versus no decks? Going to be something smaller than that, probably, right? We as realtors subscribe to a code of ethics. And that code of ethics says you're not going to steal clients from other realtors because that's unethical. It's called tortious interference with contractual relations. Don't poach. I'm not talking about somebody that guy in the next cubicle from you has kind of been chatting with. I'm talking about somebody that has been hired by someone else, someone who has listed with someone else. Don't go after their business on that one. Now, you could help them on something that's not that one. If you already knew somebody and they ended up listing with a different agent, the house that you're in the same neighborhood, maybe their next door neighbor, they hire someone else to sell the house next door to you where they live. But they also want to buy something and they haven't hired that same agent to help them with that purchase, you could be their buyer's agent and you could ask for that business. That's not solicitation. You're not soliciting the one that they've already hired the other broker to help them with, right? Article 16 is in that code of ethics. It says any sort of personal or telephone solicitations of somebody who has exclusively listed with another realtor. That is tortious interference. Also mail. If you mail something, how are you going to know? You're not. That's why in the fine print, frequently people who mail out, agents, brokers who mail things out will say, if your property is currently listed for sale, please disregard this message. Not trying to steal anybody else's listing, but I can't double check every single of the 1,000 send outs that I send every month. Not every agent sends mail, excuse me, period, much less that many. But that's one way that they make sure that they say, hey, I'm not trying to steal your business. But here's the rule for it. We also can get business by calling, making straight up cold calls. Who wants to cold call? Want to join me in the morning? Who wants to join me tomorrow morning? We're just going to get on the phone, start calling random strangers and say, hey, do you need some help for real estate? Call Neil. Who's with me? No? Come on, guys. I thought you loved it. Yeah, you'll get paid if I sell it, if I get it in the future. So there are agents who have success with cold calling, but there are rules. Who's gotten a call this week and you're like rolling your eyes, spam. I thought I was on that do not call list. Why are they calling me? Anybody on the do not call list, but you're still getting called? Yeah, it's a real thing. We are subject to the do not call list also. We can't call to solicit business if someone is on the list, except in these situations. Here they are. The do not call rules for brokers. You can call people who are on the do not call list if it's been 18 months, within 18 months since you helped them with a purchase or a sale. Now, I would like to think that during the course of a real estate transaction, you earned enough trust that they think of you not so much as a telemarketer anymore, but as a sort of almost a friend. But we're just talking straight up about the do not call list rules, period. And these apply to everybody who's asking for business. But these are the ones that apply more specifically to brokers. So if you've sold something to them in the last 18 months, for those within those 18 months of that purchase, you can still call them even if they show up on the do not call registry. That's a national list. You can hire firms that will sell you lists of names, and they'll say, this is a list that's on the do not call registry. Don't call these ones, but here's the ones that are not on the do not call list. You can buy that. You can pay for that. You can also probably get some version of it for free, but then you're going to have to scrub the list yourself. Another category where you can call people on the do not call list is if they inquired from you for information. Maybe you have a website, maybe you had a Facebook post or website, and it says, hey, fill out this form if you want information on this listing. If they fill out the information for more info, or if they make a request for more information, then you have the right, even though they are on the do not call list, you can call them for 3 months. 3 months after they make an inquiry on your stuff, on your website, for instance. There's if you Google search do not call registry, Ben, you should be able to register your number on the do not call list. And then here's some more. You cannot try to get listings from a for sale by owner who is on the do not call list. Wait a minute. They said for sale by owner. Why can't I call a for sale by owner? Can you call a for sale by owner? Yes. Why are you calling them though? You can't call a for sale by owner who's on the do not call list if you're trying to get their listing. But if it's a for sale by owner who's on the do not call list and you legitimately have a buyer who might want to buy their house, that's why they put their number on the sign. You are allowed to call them if you have a buyer. How many agents lie about having a buyer just so that they can get to the door in front of that for sale by owner seller and surprise attack them with a listing appointment? A lot. A lot of agents will do this. It's not cool. It's also not allowed. You better have a real buyer if you promise that seller that you do, right? If that for sale by owner's on the do not call list and you don't have a buyer for their house, don't call them. Oh, but they don't know it yet, but it's in their best interest for them to list with me. I just need to have a chance to explain that to them. No, you don't. Wrong. They're grown. They chose not to list with someone. You don't have the right to call that seller on the do not call list to tell them how stupid they were and that they should just hire you anyway and give up trying to sell it themselves. And then don't solicit listings of other firms ever. Even if it's your neighbor and that jerk, he knew you got your license. Why didn't he hire you? It's in his best interest to hire somebody like you because it's in your best interest to sell it for the most money. How dare he do that? Sorry, you got to work that out at the next cookout, but you can't tell him to fire the agent he hired and hire you. That's solicitation upside down and backwards. What does this mean? This entire slide is all about what? You're not allowed to do what? Oh, that's a good point. Somebody in a direct message here says, what if you buy the list from somebody and they gave you numbers that are on the DNC? Well, first of all, you should have a talk with them because if they told you they were all scrubbed, then they lied to you, gave you something that they promised not. Another number to know for the do not call list is if you have a list of people that are supposedly on the do not call registry, you have to scrub it. You have to make sure it's current within 30 days. Every 30 days, you have to make sure it's current list. You can't say, oh, I bought this list last year. Oops, silly me. Sorry, I didn't know you were on the do not call. The list I have has you not on it. You've got to be a good list. Got to be no older than a 30-day do not call registry list. Got to keep it scrubbed. And these other places that you might pay a service to give you that information, you want to make sure they're doing that and they're complying with these rules because it falls on you if you mess up. And it's pretty expensive if somebody decided to complain and has proof, and I don't know what is required to get all that lined up, that you violated this, intentionally called a do not call person. I think it's like $11,000 potentially per offense. If it gets to the extreme, it ain't cheap, but people still do it, but they're not supposed to. And it can get pricey. There is a do not call list. There is not a do not mail list. You can mail all you want to. Here comes Skeptical Neil again. Conspiracy Neil is thinking, so just like the entity who put themselves as the first lien position for real property tax, the government says we're in the first and second position, because also special assessments, first two positions from the ones who actually wrote the law. Well, the one who wrote the do not call rules also happens to own a mailing company. You can mail through USPS all day long, or anything. You can mail to somebody, but it's not free, right? You got to pay the money, but there is no do not mail list. Feel free. Mail to your favorite 2,000 houses every month if you want to. Don't expect to get a piece of business on the first mailing, by the way. It's probably going to take a good year for them to just consistently see you show up in their box, because it's about a 3-second window. You get it out of the box, you look at it, you throw it away, don't you? We all do it. I have a stack on the counter upstairs that I'm about to throw away. So you have a very short, and it's only when that person actually wants to think about real estate that's going to make a difference to them. The last 14 of these that I saw, I didn't care about because I wasn't thinking about selling, but today I am. So let me set this and let me keep this one. Maybe I'll check this person out. So it's not a bad method if you have the budget for it. And that means long term. It's a long game. You better have enough budget to be sending it out for a whole year. That's not testable. That's just mailing 101. You can certainly mail. You can also door knock. There is no do not knock list. Once you get there, you might see a no solicitation sign, and then do what you will. Be ready for the dog or the shotgun sound or whatever, just in case. We are here in the South. However, feel free. Go knock. I would probably respect the no solicitation sign, because I don't want to be that guy, especially now, in the holiday season. And I don't want to knock, but a lot of agents are doing it. I don't know about a lot, but there are agents who are knocking. There are agents who are cold calling, but none of these three things have a not allowed to do it. You just have to, on the email one, you get a list of emails. You can certainly send them out. You can go to MailChimp, Constant Contact. There's all kinds of services where you can send bulk multiple emails, thousands of them at a time. But that email has to have an unsubscribe. Who's gotten junk email? And you're like, I don't want to get this one anymore. And where do you find the unsubscribe? You got to go all the way to the bottom. You got to put on your glasses because it's really fine print. And the ones I hate the most, you click on unsubscribe and you would think that you'd be done, but they take you to a site. And then you have to go through another couple of pages to finally, yes, okay, now you're unsubscribed. As long as you give them an out to unsubscribe, you are allowed to email. You can also fax. Pause, as we remember fondly, not so fondly, that horrible method of communication. Email and fax has to have an unsubscribe. Door knocking and mailers like postal service, you can do it. That is not part of the do not call. Here's a little nuance. Who looks forward to having your license and being able to run across somebody who doesn't need to buy in your area? Maybe they want to buy in Alaska and you could still get paid. You can make a referral fee because you connected them with somebody in another part of the world. It goes the other way too. What if an agent in Alaska calls you one day randomly and says, hey, Greg, I know you got your license. I see your website. I have somebody, my neighbor up here in Alaska. I want to refer them to you there in Charlotte or Raleigh or wherever in North Carolina. Will you take care of them? And you probably will say, sure, I'd love to. And you'll work out a referral fee. Negotiable. Could be agent to agent referral fees. I see 20, 25%, maybe 30% of the commission. Not 30% of the sale price, but 30% of the commission. Not a standard. Again, no standards. But what if they call you and they say, hey, you know what? We are in Virginia. Like, anybody heard of Gretna, Virginia, or Alta Vista, Virginia? Those little towns on the southern part of Virginia. And some of you are in the Triangle area, which isn't all that far from the Virginia line, just an hour or two, a couple hours. What if an agent from Virginia said, look, my little old granny wants to move down there, and I'm an agent here in Virginia, but would you pay me a referral fee if I refer my little granny to you to help her buy a house? Sure. Okay, great. Well, then I'm going to drive her down there this Saturday. You would say, well, back up right there. Number one, I'm happy to pay you a referral fee. But number two, North Carolina Real Estate Commission will not let you bring granny. What? She's my granny. Stick her in an Uber. I don't care. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Be nice to granny. No, the Real Estate Commission says we can't pay a referral fee to an agent if they come here while that business is being done. They would have to have, in order to pay them a referral fee, they have to have an active license and they have to stay home. They can't come here with the person. They can't do real estate brokerage in North Carolina without a North Carolina license. They don't have a North Carolina license. They have a Virginia license or a South Carolina license or wherever. So they need to stay in their lane. If they're going to refer it to you and expect you to pay them a referral fee, they can't be involved in the transaction. Now, Granny comes here. He's like, okay, great, fine. I trust you. You look fine on the website, and I believe that you'll take good care of her. So, okay, I will send her to you. Maybe you pick her up at the airport and you drive her all around. You show stuff and it goes great. You drop her back off at her hotel after day one and you go about your business. You go home. Does Granny maybe call him, grandson or son or whoever that is to her, and talk about the day? Probably. Can you control that? No. But you do have to say, look, don't be involved in Granny's decision. Don't expect to come here and get in the car with us while we drive around looking. Because the odds are that you're an agent in another state, you won't be able to help yourself but to give Granny some real estate advice. And if you do that about real estate in North Carolina, you just broke our rules. And I can't pay you a commission. What if he says, oh, you know what? That's just crazy. I'm certainly going to come and bring her myself. She's my granny. Okay, fine. That's okay. Do so, but I can't pay you the fee. That's what this is about. You can't pay them a referral fee if they're involved in the transaction. If they insist on being involved, they want to come, they want to go around with you and look at houses and give Granny advice, that is allowed, but you can't pay them a referral fee. Only pay them the fee if they are not involved. If they don't engage in brokerage activities, if they don't go around looking at the houses, and if they don't give advice, right? What about this idea that some of the bigger firms in the city, what if two or three of the biggest firms in the city say, you know what, let's divide Raleigh into 4 quadrants: northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. We're the 4 biggest firms. We pretty much own this whole town. Therefore, let's not compete against each other. Let's just compete against the dozens and dozens of other firms. This is just us, the big 4. And so firm A, we're not going to come up there into the northeast section. We're going to leave that to you. You get to work that section all by yourself. You won't ever get competition from us. But firm B, you get the southeast portion. Firm C, you get the southwest portion. Firm D, you get the northwest portion. That would be inciting, encouraging a monopoly, and that is not allowed through Sherman antitrust laws. It's unfair to the consumer. The consumer should have the right to consider any firm. Therefore, if the firms get together and try to deny the consumers there in the northeast section some of the access to the other firms because they're carving it up, they're encouraging a monopoly, and that's not allowed. Through FTC. It's enforced by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And then price fixing. Sherman antitrust laws also prohibit price fixing. An industry can't set a standard fee. Anybody ever seen on Facebook or in a conversation, somebody said, what is the standard commission? Tell me in the chat. What is the standard commission if I were to ask you that question? That is a good answer. That's the official proper answer that you know to say now. But have you ever heard of a number? And what number? Yeah, you hear that a lot. Was another? A split, like a split between a firm. But in terms of like a straight up amount of commission of the sale price, you hear stuff on movies and TV and on news sites, and people will say 4, 5, 6. Seems to hover around those sorts of things. But anytime from here forward that you hear that conversation, and I've seen it on Facebook posts, and I have to chime in sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm not the police today. I'm just going to let them have their conversation, and I'm going to move on. But the proper answer is, look, like you said there is no standard. It's always negotiable. Now, can you say this? Hey, what's the standard commission rate in the industry in Charlotte? Could you say, I don't know what the standard is, but my firm charges 6%. Can you say that? Allowed? Legal? Yeah. Your firm can choose to charge a certain rate. Could you say, I charge 5% minimum? Yeah, same thing. You can make a business decision. You just can't say all of us charge X, right? Across the MLS, across the Realtor Association, a group of firms, a group of individual brokers can't set a standard. Because again, it goes back to, does it harm the public? Yeah. If the public has no choices, it could be harmful to the public. They need to have choices. So good words here. There is no such thing as a standard. Each firm sets their own. And by the way, the firm in their policy and procedures manual, when you interview with them, you look at that policy and procedures manual, they could have all manner of things in there. They could say, we are a full service firm. We choose to charge 6%. If you want to, you can negotiate that down. However, we're still going to expect to get our cut based on 6%. If you want to negotiate down because it's what it takes to get the listing, you're either going to just not negotiate down and just walk away, or you're going to take the entire hit yourself. So the firms sometimes make you do that. But all commissions are negotiable. Sometimes, though, you just have to walk away. Sometimes, if you can't come to an agreement with that seller and they're looking for a limited service price commission, maybe they say, I saw some people advertise like a 4% commission and you want 6%. Gosh, that's a lot of money. Why are you so greedy? Well, what are you getting for 4%? And they may not know. Well, let's examine that. Let's find out. It sounds to me like it might be a limited service option. And I don't do limited service. I do full service. Or you might give them a choice. I'm on my own. I can do whatever I want to. And so, yeah, I would in certain cases, especially if they're going to use me to both sell their house and buy the next one. Yeah, I'll wheel and deal and take a little less. Maybe for the lower commission I'm charging, I don't have to do as much. That's limited service. So I don't have to pay extra for drone stuff or professional. Maybe I'll just come out with myself with a decent camera and take my own shots. Literally doing that tomorrow. It's a past customer. It's a buddy from the dog park, how I met him. It's also a past student who passed the class and got into the business and then got back out of the business, and he's listing his house with me tomorrow. However, he asked me, would you do it for this? Less than what I normally would do it for. But he's also buying one that I'm going to help him with. So I get paid on that one too. And so he asked me today, are you coming out to take pictures tomorrow? Or are you sending a professional? And I'm like, I'll be coming to take them myself. I'm doing this for a discount from what I normally charge. No, I'm not paying money for professional photos, right? Fee for service, a la carte, you could say in all of those, any of those kinds of ways. You can also not do this under Sherman antitrust laws. You could think of it as bullying. That's why I put this little picture in here. Oops. But boycotting would be a group of firms, a group of brokers getting together and saying, hey, you know what? We don't like what that agent across town is doing. We're going to get together and not show their listings ever. Kind of cancel culture, kind of trying to cancel them. It's not allowed. Sherman antitrust laws, again, if you don't show the listings by ABC firm, because maybe why? Why might somebody, oh, thank you. Appreciate that, Ben. Why might somebody decide to not show listings from a certain firm? Remember that MLS sheet we looked at the bottom of the sheet? It showed what they were paying to a buyer agent or a sub agent. Maybe it's a firm that routinely pays lower commission splits. That happened up in Salisbury years ago when I was brand new. There was a firm, one of the bigger firms out there, that always charged or always paid out at the time something lower than what everybody was used to. It was their right, not illegal. But if other firms had gotten together and said, you guys are paying out 2.45%, and what they would actually do is pay 2.45 to the buyer agent, and they themselves would keep 2.55. So they would charge 5% total commission and with a slightly uneven split between the selling firm and the listing firm. It's fine. It's legal. And you're seeing some of that now too out there, where a listing agent is paying the buyer agent side less than what they themselves are keeping. That's allowed. But if agents got together and said, that firm up there, they keep doing that, let's just agree not to show any of their listings. Well, you're harming those sellers, right? Taking it out on them, the fact that their broker that they've hired is paying a lower commission, which is a legal allowed as a right. It's a legal right that they can do. So you can't boycott. And that also applies to like, oh, we don't like what this home inspector's doing. He always exaggerates how bad things are, how bad the repairs are that are needed. Therefore, he's killing deals. He's a deal killing home inspector. Let's not use them ever again. Because the people, he scares everybody thinking it's way worse than it really is. Can't gather together, lighting the torches and running businesses out of town, for instance. Okay, let's have a break. I'll see you in 10. We're back. Let's bring it together. Here's an example under Sherman Antitrust of that whole market allocation problem. Not allowed to do that, right? Not allowed to there we go. Divide up a market. There's Charlotte. Can't have company B for the Northeast, etc. What's it take to earn real estate commission? If you were to see a test question like this, compensation of a firm is handled in the contract. True or false? Well, it would never be true or false. But that is not true. We don't handle our compensation in the offer to purchase. What the firm is getting, what the total commission is handled in the listing agreement. That's the hiring document. So there are in fact two things not allowed to be in the contract. We'll get to that in chapters 9 and 10, but I'll give you the heads up on it. Two provisions that are not allowed to be in the standard any offer to purchase and contract when an agent is involved. Number one is our commission. What should only be in the contract is what's between the buyer and the seller. Right? Not what we as brokers are making in commission. We can't have our compensation in a contract. I've had a contract come in with that written in it before. And that was wrong. And I told the agent, you can't do that. It was a case where my seller was only wanting to pay the buyer agent, I think it was 2% commission. Well, that buyer agent wrote up an offer. And in the offer, it said, see attached addendum. And it was a completely written from scratch addendum. And it said buyer agent commission to be 2.5%. She wanted 2.5. We were paying 2. She wanted 2.5. And she wrote it in the offer. Exactly the wrong way to handle it. What she should have done if she had a problem with the commission is to just handle it with me separately and say, hey, not thrilled with this 2%. Any way that your seller would pay more? And we'd have probably given her the same answer. No, we already thought about that. And so we're in a market where we've, by the way, got 10 other offers. So none of them ask for more. And tough luck. But what her other choices were as a buyer agent were to get the extra 0.5% from her own buyer. Maybe that's what she did. I just know that I don't remember if she's the one that my folks picked. I think she was. Yeah. So I don't know what she did, but I just know that the sellers only paid her 2%. They paid me a full commission or a total commission, and then I shared with her, and her part was 2. My part was more, by the way. We chose to give me more. How much more? I don't remember exactly. But here's my logic on that one. I had more upfront costs. I don't know what her costs are. She could have come in and just shown that one house and made commission on that one house or she could have been with them for 9 months and taken forever. I get it. It's tough to be a buyer agent. It's tough to be a listing agent, but all I have control over are my costs. And I know what I have to do with the work I have to do. And if it's between me and my seller, we might agree together to not give an even split. Builders do it all the time. I have a new construction right now, and I'm making a 1% commission. And I've made plenty of 2.5, sometimes 3, sometimes with a bonus in new construction before. All negotiable. It is what it is. If I have a problem with that 1% commission, I need to address it with my buyer and say, look, buyer, when I help a buyer as a buyer agent, I charge 2.5. So we need to come up with another 1.5% commission from you because the seller's only paying me 1. That's an option. In that case, that's a decent enough price point that I'm ending up with enough of a dollar amount figure that I'm okay with it. It's another twofer. So I'm making money helping them sell as well as buy. Therefore, I happen to be okay with that particular 1%. I'm not going to advertise to the world that I work for 1%, but on that transaction I do because I choose to. You don't have to only charge the same amount to everybody, right? So the compensation is found in the listing agreement, and here it is under provision 7. Seller agrees to pay the firm a total fee of blank % of the sale price, or fill in the blank if it's some other weird way that you're doing your math. Maybe it's a flat fee. You could list a house for a flat fee. They could say, look, all I want from you is to put it in the MLS. I don't want you to do anything. You don't have to even take pictures. I've got lovely pictures I'll give you to put in there for me. I want you to be a limited service broker. Have you noticed that I've carefully avoided the word discount? I don't say discount broker. Anybody heard the term discount broker? For the same reason through that Sherman Antitrust, those rules that we just saw, for the same reason that we can't say it's a standard commission, we also can't say that there's a discount commission or it's a discount broker. A discount from what? It's only a discount if there's a standard from which it is discounted. Therefore, don't call those guys discount brokers. Don't even call yourself a discount broker if that's what you're doing. Because if you're charging less than a full commission, whatever that means to you, why are you doing that? Because you're doing less in services for them. So therefore, call it a limited service broker. When you're a limited service broker like that, you are allowed to limit the services you provide. But what you can never do is limit the responsibilities that you have for them. You still have to be an agent with fiduciary. You don't only do 70% of fiduciary duties, right? There's 6 fiduciary duties. You still have to provide all of them. So the phrase is this: you can limit your services, but you cannot limit your responsibilities. And I've had to remind a limited service broker that before. I was the buyer agent. He was helping the seller. The seller was a builder, and that builder just wanted him to stick it in the MLS. And so a couple of times, actually in the MLS, in the remarks section, it said, this is a limited service listing. All offers are to be made directly to the seller. Don't call the agent. And that's okay. That's allowed. It's a limited service. So I'm interacting with the seller only. Yes, there's a listing agent, but their services are limited. I had to make the offer straight to the seller. I had to negotiate with the seller. I had to align the showings with the seller. They instructed me not to deal with the broker. But there came a time in the transaction where the seller was being difficult. That builder was being kind of obstinate. He was kind of almost getting into arguments with me. And it was getting to the point where it was potentially affecting my buyer. So I actually reached out to his listing agent and I said, look, we're getting to a point where he's not really so easy to work with here. And, don't forget, you chose to be a limited service broker, but you're only limiting your service. You still have responsibilities. So I need you to chime back in here, plug back in, deal with him, help him understand what's going on here, because I'm starting to feel like we're getting to a point that we don't need to be. In other words, do your job. I don't care if you chose to make less on the deal. You still have obligations to hold it all together. And he did. He stepped up to the plate. He got the guy back on track, helped him understand things. What does it take to earn a commission? Well, it's in the listing agreement. Also, you can have an active listing real estate license, and you have to have a valid and written listing contract. There is no verbal listing agreement. There is no oral listing agreement. Okay, so we're talking about this listing thing right now. The seller has agreed to pay a total commission to their firm, listing firm. That listing firm has decided to share that total with another firm who's going to bring the buyer, possibly. They may not share that evenly. They may or may not. But the buyer's probably going to come from a whole other firm, whole different broker than the one that listed the property, right? That's why you're a member. That's why you subscribe to the MLS, because you want to cooperate with other firms. It's quite likely it's going to be another firm who brings the buyer. Just because that buyer agent, selling firm brings the buyer doesn't mean that they are obligated or beholden to the seller, since it's the seller who's paying the commission, right? The seller's paying a total commission, and that buyer agent is going to end up getting paid because of what the seller has decided to pay. But just because the seller is paying the commission doesn't mean the buyer agent owes them anything more than the bare minimum. Bare minimum being disclosure and reasonable skill and care, right? That's where we get this. Oh, not quite. That's a little different, but this kind of leads up to that. When do we get paid the money? When do we actually get our check? Yeah, that's usually when we actually get our hands on the money. Sorry. 1 second. There we go. There it is. But when did we earn it? That's the big difference. We earned it before the closing day, but we still only receive it from closing. In fact, we might even get it after closing, because we got to get the check from the closing attorney, take it back to the office, give it to our office manager, and then they are going to cut us our check, because the check you get from the attorney is the total to your firm's side. Then you need to get your split with your firm's side. But when did you earn it? Even as a listing agent, did you earn it on closing? No, you earned it back when that was a ready, willing, and able buyer. I think we might have touched on that a little bit before. What is a ready, willing, and able buyer? Well, ready and willing is pretty easy. They showed up. They made an offer. They showed that they're ready. They showed that they were willing. Are they able, though? On day one of it being under contract, are they an able buyer? Maybe not if they're getting a loan. We don't know if they're able yet because the loan hasn't been approved yet. So if your seller were to just say, you know what, I don't want to sell anymore, you would, first of all, hyperventilate. You would try to explain to them, look, you're under contract. You want to bail? You're basically breaching. You don't want to sell it? Yeah, I just changed my mind. But we're under contract. Therefore, you are obligated. Therefore, that buyer could sue you for specific performance. We'll get into that next week. Actually, tomorrow. So are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, well, do they owe you a commission? Where the day after the house went under contract, the seller wants to bail, wants to breach. Yeah, the buyer could sue them for specific performance because they are breaching the contract. But could you sue them for your commission? Probably not. If that's a buyer getting a loan, you probably don't have full loan approval yet. So it's not an able. It's a ready and a willing, but not an able buyer. But let's fast forward. Maybe the seller doesn't breach until like the day before closing. And so a few days earlier than that, they did get a conditional approval letter from the lender. The lender said, good news, everything's checked out. All you have to do is show up to closing. We're going to give them the money. They are approved, official approval. Now we have an able buyer, ready, willing, and able. Now if the seller breaches, they're subject to being sued by the buyer for specific performance. They're also subject to being sued by the brokers for the commission because the brokers have earned the commission. It is a ready, willing, and able buyer. So when we get paid is not the same as when we've actually earned it. We're getting paid after, sometimes weeks after we actually earned it. Oh gosh, okay. I'm gonna get this right eventually. Okay. So here's some examples of when we still have earned the commission. this. We still could be due the commission if the spouse won't sign. We still could be due the commission if the transaction falls through because of a clouded title, a defect in the title that can't get fixed. You did your stuff. You did your part. You produced a ready, willing, and able buyer, but the seller won't maybe do what's required to get that title cleared up, but you still are owed the commission. Are you going to go after him for it? Maybe, maybe not. That's a decision between you and your firm. If the seller can't deliver possession and the transaction falls through, you still produced a ready, willing, and able buyer. Therefore, you are still officially entitled to the commission. Again, do you want to actually go after it? Maybe, maybe not. If the seller has signed the listing agreement, but then comes back and says, I also want this and this and this, and are therefore requiring terms that aren't in the listing agreement, you did what you were supposed to do based on the originally agreed upon terms. They can't just pull new terms from out of the air or anywhere else. If the seller and the buyer cancel, they agree to just mutually say, you know what, let's not do this anymore. I'm not mad at you. You're not mad at me. We're just going to make this contract go away between us. We're going to let it die. That doesn't let the seller off the hook for paying the commission. And then if the buyer breaches the sales contract, broker has still earned it. The commission should come from somewhere. Again, what do you have to do to go get it? Well, that's a whole other discussion you don't need to know for this test, but you could still be owed it. Do you want to go after them, sue them for it? It's a business decision. I think we've seen this phrase before, and here it is, procuring cause of sale. What if there's a broker who worked with a buyer, got the buyer agency agreement signed, showed them houses, maybe even made an offer, and the offer didn't work out, and so the buyer was frustrated. Then let's just say while the broker thinks the buyer is waiting, just kind of licking their wounds, feeling sorry for themselves, deciding when they want to get back at it, try to look at it for more houses. What they don't know is that buyer has just found out that their long-lost friend from high school just got her real estate license, and she's all excited, and she's like, gosh, you should just let me help you. Clearly that other agent isn't good enough for you. They weren't able to help you. Yeah, okay, so they were asking $400,000 for the house and you offered $300,000. If that was a good agent, they would have gotten that seller to agree to it. I wouldn't do much better than them. Therefore, why don't you just kind of ghost them, don't answer their calls, and I'll help you. How are they ever going to know? Right? And so she starts working with them. They find the next thing. And what usually happens when a buyer is unsuccessful first couple of times, whether it's a different agent or not, they start learning what it takes to actually succeed at buying something, and they make better offers, right? More attractive, stronger offers. And so inevitably they end up succeeding. And maybe that agent who they used while you were sitting at home waiting for them to call you back took all the credit, said, oh, look what I did. I'm so much better. Well, once you somehow find out that this agent helped them, that they bought a house. Maybe you finally call them to check up on them, and they slip up and forget they're supposed to keep it a secret. Or maybe social media tells on them more frequently. That's what happens today. And they post. You're on their social media as a Facebook friend or Instagram friend, and they post the new house. And you're like, wait a minute. I wasn't at that closing. I should have been involved with that. And you start figuring out, then you can access it in the MLS and see who the agent was that helped them buy it. Wait a minute, that's not me. I'm pretty sure that was not me. You could pursue the commission. You could call that agent's broker in charge and say, look, I don't know what you got going on over there, but your agent should have asked those people if they had an agent, because I still have a valid current buyer agency agreement with that buyer. I was the procuring cause of sale. I originated the series of events that led to the closing. Now, the problem was it without a break in their continuity. And did it result in procuring a ready, willing, and able buyer? So the pursuit of the investigation is going to bring all that stuff up. It's kind of probably hard to unring a bell. Are you going to get that new firm, that other firm, to share the commission with you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they acknowledge that their agent didn't even ask or knew better, but did it anyway. That would be even worse. If she knew that you had a buyer agency agreement, her advice should have been, look, guys, I would love to help you. I think I'll do a great job for you. But if you have a buyer agency agreement with another broker, you need to work that out and get rid of it. Either let it expire or ask them to let you out of it. And at that point, then we can start working together. Otherwise, she is running the risk of that first broker doing this, coming after the commission and saying, I am the procuring cause of sale, therefore give me all or some of the commission. I had a situation like that. I ended up getting to keep all the commission, but the buyer was, at the time I was brand new in the business in my mid-20s, and I had a buddy who was a first-time buyer, same age demographic. He was at a new construction community just on his own, not cheating on me or anything. He was just there kind of looking. And this young lady came in that he found attractive. That's what got his attention. She was visibly upset and annoyed and ticked off. Turns out she had met her agent there to go looking at some other houses. The agent worked across town, like 45 minutes away. He forgot his lockbox key. Mistakes happen. That wasn't her big problem. Her problem was it was a long line of other things that she was annoyed with him about. He had kind of been talking down to her. He had kind of been showing her stuff that she didn't really want, maybe stuff that gave him more commission as opposed to gave her the stuff that was really on her list. And she was done. She was fed up. And he said, well, why don't you call Neil? He won't forget his key. So he looked out for me, and she did. She called me and she said, you know what? I've been working with this guy. By the way, I worked for ABC company. He also worked for the same company, except I worked out of the university location and he worked out of the South Charlotte location. So she called me, said, Eric referred you to me. Let me just let you know right off the bat, if you can't help me, I'm done with your company. I'm going to go across town to your firm rival, right? I'm giving you a shot because your friend spoke highly of you. So I went to my manager. I said, look, here's the deal. She's mad at one of our guys down in South Charlotte. She wants to use me. And the first question my managing broker asked me, which was the first question I asked the girl, the young lady, do you have a buyer agency agreement? And the answer was no. He had never had one done. He didn't even explain the working with agents disclosure. Didn't have that signed, didn't have an agency agreement. He was kind of running and gunning, just being informal, plus screwing up because he did some stuff that she wasn't happy with. So she left. She's like, I said, let him know that you want out. You don't want to work with him anymore. And she did. So then I had this new buyer, and you better believe I got all the paperwork done first day, working plus buyer agency agreement. We started from scratch. He had shown her a handful of things, one of which was a townhouse in the university area, which was my area really. But he had shown it to her first. We looked at the whole city over an entire month of 2 or 3 days a week. I would show her a handful of things at a time. Even showed some things to her mother along with. Mother came along a few times. South Charlotte, Raintree, Pineville, we ended up, as luck would have it, bad luck, she ended up wanting to buy that townhouse that he had shown her, which I showed her too, but he showed it first. So 3 days after closing, my manager called me in the office, said, hey, that broker from South Charlotte, his BIC down there at that firm has told me, reached out and said that he sees that she had that closing. She bought the one that he showed her. He says he's the procuring cause. He wants the entire commission. He wanted me to give over that entire commission. And I said, let me think about it. No. So the agent said back to that man, that broker, no, he's not interested in that deal. And came back and said, okay, how about 50-50? And I'm like, she was mad at him. She fired him. She would have gone to another firm. She didn't have any paperwork done. She did with me. And I didn't even just swoop in and sell the one thing. I didn't only show her that one thing. I did the whole job from top to bottom. Started from scratch over again. So that's a no also. And then it turned into 40%. He tried that. And then here's my broker, my manager, calling me in several times. Okay, how about 35? And I'm like, whose side are you on? That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, why are you? And she actually got to the point, she said, you know what, Neil, sometimes it's good just to put things behind us, move forward. Let's just put it to rest and move. But why did putting it to rest cost me 35% and not her anything? And I'm like, finally, she wore me down. And I said, you know what? Okay, since you seem to be so excited about getting rid of this problem for yourself at my expense, okay, I give up. I'll pay him 20% and we'll be done with it. And he said, no. And he said, I'll take 35. And I said, okay, gritting my teeth, I'll do 25. And he said, nope, 33. And I said, I'm done. I tried it your way. He clearly has issues. Maybe he should spend less time trying to pick my pocket and more time trying to go get another client and take care of them this time. The cattiness came out. Well, we agreed. We got to a standstill. We couldn't come to terms. I said, I'm done. I'm not doing it. All of it's off the table. I'm not even going back to the 20. And they said, well, since we're all in the same firm, rather than air our dirty laundry to the whole world, which we would have to do if we went to the realtor board, because, right, we can't go to the commission, go to the realtor board to work it out. How about if you both agree to appear before a board of 3 other managers that don't know any of you? Neither of you know 3 other managers because that firm we worked for had 12 locations. And we agreed to basically have a little board of arbitration. And I presented my case. He presented his case. Long story short, you better believe I had her write me a nice letter to give to them that said I was going to fire him. I was going to go to a competitor. I was going to do this. He did this and this and this. So the deck was stacked in my favor and I won. I didn't have to give him a dime. He probably should have been happy with that 20%, right? But his claim of being the procuring cause of sale was not correct either, was it? First of all, he originated a series of events. Sure, you could be an oral buyer agent. Okay, no paperwork needed for that. But was it without a break? Not at all. There was a definite break. Plus, she was going to break up with him anyway and go to a whole different firm. So that's what procuring cause is about. These 3 litmus tests: origination, no breaking continuity, and a result of a ready, willing, and able buyer. That's the test you would have to face in a court if you tried to sue over the commission. Were you a procuring cause of sale? Okay. What happens if you forget to do your continuing education by June 10th? At what point? When does it go inactive? Yeah, July 1st. Is that what you said? Yep. So let's say that happens. July 1st rolls around. Your license is inactive or you didn't pay the money, so it's expired. What is your first step if your license goes inactive? Testable question. Say again? That's a good next step. I'm looking for a very specific first thing above all else because you can't. Yeah, that's also a good first half of a step. The very, very first thing you would do is not do any real estate, right? Just look for that as the testable question. Cease brokerage activities immediately, right? First thing, don't do anything that requires a license because you just now don't have a license. immediately, right? When your license goes inactive or expires, stop doing real estate. Yes, then do all those things you were talking about. Talk to your BIC, figure out how to get active or get current again. But that license has to be on active status in order for you to do real estate. However, if you lost the license when inactive, oh, that's funny. Try to fix that. There we go. And then you lost the license, but you had already done a transaction. There's really nothing left to do. You could still get paid the commission as long as you didn't still have to do anything that required the license, right? So as long as you did the activity and earned the commission, got under contract, did all the stuff you're supposed to do while you were on active status, then yes, you could earn commission when your license goes inactive because you'd already earned it. You did the stuff that required the license already. You were just in that moment, that waiting period of getting from, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. I'm just waiting for closing. But somehow in that meantime, you go inactive or expired, you could still get paid the commission because there's nothing requiring real estate license to do at that point. And by the way, your BIC could step in if they needed to and do whatever. Maybe they could show up for the walkthrough and you could still get paid as long as you're not doing real estate without a license. So to represent others for a fee, license law and commission rule says must have an active status. Your education must be up to date. CE by June 10th, all your posts within those 18 months. And be current, both active and current. Current means money. Paid that renewal fee, $45 by June 30th. What happens if you don't do the education? What's your status? You're an inactive broker. Didn't do the education on time. And if you don't pay the money, you're an expired. Think of a parking meter. Didn't pay the money on time. Okay. So working with a seller. Let's look at the whole listing side of things. Working with sellers, there are some pre-listing activities that you might do. Some of those would include finding and getting the copy of the seller's deed. Maybe they don't have it. Where can you find the seller's deed? It's recorded, so we can look it up. We don't have to go there. We could just go to the website and find that deed. Get a copy of their deed. Why? Why are you wanting a copy of their deed? Yeah, that's it. What if they say, oh, yeah, I was married, but I'm not anymore. Okay, great. Then I only need you to be at the appointment. But then you look up the deed and you see 2 owners or 3 owners or multiple owners. And you show up at the listing and you're like, so what's up with those other ones? Do you have some kind of proof that you are the only owner, or did I waste my time? Because I need signatures of all the owners, right? Good idea to get a copy of the survey if you can get your hands on one. They may not have it, but if they do, you're going to want to provide it to the buyer agent if possible. And the best way to get a copy of the covenants and restrictions for a neighborhood is for the seller to get them. Just the other day, I called a big management company, Henderson Properties, and they wouldn't give me the information because I'm not the owner. It's much faster, much easier, and probably free compared to another person. The owner can get it faster, cheaper, and easier than even the listing broker themselves. And making sure the dues and assessments with the HOA are right. Call them up. See if they'll tell you. It might be they're difficult to work with. Might be that they only interact with the seller. Sometimes it's a big enough neighborhood they have a community HOA website. And now all that seller has to do is log in to the HOA site and see their account, their statement. Another thing for a listing agent to be aware of is realize that the HOA might be bad at it. They might not run the show very well. There might be like deficiencies, judgments, lawsuits against them. They might have poor financial management skills, and maybe it's a townhouse community and they need roofs on all the buildings, and they don't have enough money. So they're actually in talks of figuring out a special assessment to charge everybody. And maybe that's about to be voted on next week, and you're planning on putting the house on the market next week. You're going to need to know that there is a newly confirmed special assessment. Or more importantly, even if it's a proposed special assessment, is even more important to tell the buyer, because if it's a confirmed special assessment, that means this is happening. It also means the current owner has to pay for it, as opposed to a proposed assessment. A proposed assessment says, look, we haven't figured it out yet. This is what we think we're going to do, but it's not been decided. So with a proposed special assessment, the current owner doesn't even know if it's going to happen. Therefore, if we have a closing between now and when the proposed one becomes confirmed, it's the new buyer's problem, the new owner's problem. You better believe you have to disclose that. If it's a confirmed special assessment, and maybe it went down like last year, maybe it's going to be, we need $2,000 from every owner to put out street lights or repave or re-roof. $2,000. Are they expecting every owner in there to pay them $2,000? No. They're usually going to give you a payment option. They will say, look, $2,000 total, but over the next 5 years, you can just pay us X dollars a month. Confirmed special assessment from the county, from the city. If it's got like monthly payment situation, then you need to find that out so that you can tell your seller, look, you're 2 years into a 5-year one of those situations. Well, if we have a closing next month, you're going to have to, Mr. Ms. Seller, you're going to have to pay the balance of any confirmed special assessments. Seller has to pay them. That means whatever their proceeds are from the sale is going to be that much less. The new buyer, new owner doesn't inherit that confirmed special assessment. The seller clears it up, pays it up. So all that's good stuff to figure out, find out now, so that you know what you need to disclose and tell. If it's a proposed special assessment, they're talking about maybe having it so that every owner has to pay $300 a month for the next 2 years. You better tell that buyer agent. You better put it in the MLS. Look, HOA is talking about a proposed special assessment. It could result in being $300 a month for 2 years. I had one in a subdivision with a townhouse, and they needed new roofs, and it was already one of those townhouse communities within a single family community. So they were paying big HOA dues for the whole neighborhood, little townhouse community HOA dues too, right? They paid like, I don't know, $100 a month for the big neighborhood, another $250 for the townhouse section. But then on top of that, they had to do another $250 for the roof special assessment. This wasn't a city or a county assessment. This was a little community one, but they had to do it. If they did not pay that special assessment, they could ultimately lose the house in foreclosure, right? Because an HOA can foreclose. Well, it was pretty tough to compete with other townhouses in that, this is like 20 years ago, in that market, because no other townhouses had that expensive HOA dues. We had dues plus a special assessment. No other neighborhood had such a thing, so it took us forever. Okay, what else? We need to provide the seller with some things. We're going to give them the working with agents disclosure, maybe the brochure if they have questions. We're going to also provide them with the disclosure forms. The disclosures that are required, bare minimum, are these: mineral, oil, and gas, MOG, MOG, MOG. Might see it referred to as any of those things. What kind of rights are we talking about with mineral, oil, and gas? Yeah, so not air rights, not surface rights, but there it is. Didn't think you'd ever see that word again until maybe the test. Subsurface rights. Maybe they either sold or leased the rights for some other entity, some other person to drill down, dig down, and extract mineral oil or gas. Once upon a time, a builder who shall not be named, except it was D.R. Horton, they were selling houses, new construction in North Carolina, and buried in the fine print of the contract, it said, we reserve the right to sell rights to drill oil, mineral gas. And finally, people started reading the whole contract. They saw it and they're like, I don't want to build my brand new $400,000 new construction house and have someone else be able to drill under it, potentially. So enough people fussed about it and they said, okay, we won't do that anymore. And so they don't do that anymore. But what came about is this disclosure. Up until that point, we didn't have this disclosure. It wasn't a common enough problem to warrant it. That's how this business changes every year. Stay on top of the new forms because that sort of thing happens all the time. Some big class action lawsuit happens or either is threatening to happen, or enough people complain to the real estate commission and they make a sweeping change requirement for a new form. So that brought about this mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. Now, the seller has to disclose whether they intend to sell or lease the mineral oil or gas rights, or have they done so, or do they plan to do so? They have to disclose that. They cannot check no representation when it comes to that particular item. And then the other disclosure form is the residential property disclosure form, also called RPOADS, RPOADS. It includes the homeowners association, if there is one. Got to tell people that there is one, if there is one, and what do the dues cover. And I had one just the other day, and I called on about it, and they said, yeah, it turns out we charge a $150 fee when somebody sells their house in the neighborhood. It's in order to close out the account from the seller and start up the new account with the new owner. And my question was, is there a fee required to be paid either by seller or buyer for such a thing? And they said, we don't care who pays it, but yeah, there is a fee. They can work it out between them, negotiate it. And so I needed to know as a listing broker so I could tell everybody, look, you're going to have to pay this fee. And since it's a seller's market, it's an optional, as far as the HOA is concerned, they don't care who pays it, but we do. So I think I'm going to advise my seller, look, let's go ahead and tell people you're going to have to pay this fee. Seller's going ahead and on record right now saying we're not paying it. Now we might get an offer from somebody who says, I want you to pay it, seller, not me. Maybe. But in a seller's market like this, we probably have a pretty good shot at my seller not having to pay it. Need to find all that stuff out because you need to disclose it. Here's what the working with real estate agents disclosure looks like. We saw these things already. We deep dived into them. We need to talk to that seller about them, right? We know how to do that. Hey, seller, I'm here to list your property. We haven't done that paperwork yet. So right now, as we're talking about what you want for it, don't tell me anything that if you're interviewing other brokers and I end up not being the one you pick, don't tell me anything you don't want a buyer to know. Because if you don't hire me to help you sell, odds are that I might bring the buyer for your house. And if you tell me what you would minimally, what the least you would take is, then I would have to tell that to my buyer client because that would be my client to whom I owe everything, right? Don't tell me anything you don't want other agents to know. So you go there for a pre-listing meeting in person and you're talking to the seller about what the property maybe what it's worth, what you think it's going to sell for. Actually, that's the proper way to say it. As brokers, we don't say what things are worth. That's what appraisers do. We'll learn that in 17. As brokers, we say what the probable sales price is, the price range at which it will probably sell for. But we're going to talk to them about what it's going to take to get it sold, how great we are maybe, and what amazing things we do to get it sold. We're going to take a tour of the property. It's a great time to kind of bond, build rapport. It's also a good time as we're walking through to just stop and look at that stain on the ceiling And eventually they're going to realize that you're not walking with them anymore, and they're going to look back at you, and they're going to say, "Oh, yeah, see, that was before we put the new roof on. Do you think we should paint there's no leak anymore, but do you think we should get rid of that stain?" Yeah, probably. Let's do that. Do you have an invoice, by the way, from the repair, from the roof replacement? Because if they say it's been fixed, you want to be able to prove that it's been fixed, right? So pointing out red flags, looking for red flags, any signs of moisture in the basement. And explaining to them their rights surrounding the disclosure itself. Three choices they can check the boxes of are: yes, there's a problem; no, there's not; or I'm not telling. They can choose no representation. But if they've gone ahead and told you that the roof leaks before they choose to check no representation, yes, they can still check no representation, but it's not going to do them any good, because now you have the legal requirement as a broker to disclose that they just told you the roof leaks. So you're going to have to put that in the MLS probably, right? So before they accidentally tell you something they turns out didn't want to disclose, you need to let them know what their rights are. You have the right to remain silent. Don't tell me anything you don't want me to tell the world, because I have to tell them. If you want to check no representation for this whole disclosure, but you know for sure that some things are not, in fact, working properly, that is your legal right. But don't tell me those things that are not working properly. And as long as it's something that you normally wouldn't run across, because you do have a duty to discover and disclose, what does that extend to? That if it got into it where a buyer complained that the dishwasher didn't work, could you, as a listing broker, push a button to see if a dishwasher works? Yes. So a deciding authority, maybe the real estate commission, for instance, could say, yeah, you should have verified that dishwasher worked or didn't. We have a buyer who cares about it. They're mad. They're complaining. They made a complaint. Did you exercise your duty to discover and disclose? No, you don't have to put on coveralls and go crawling in the crawl space. That is not the scope of our responsibility. But you can flip a light switch. You can open a cabinet and look underneath, see if there's a leaky sink. You can hit a button on a dishwasher or a microwave. It only matters when it matters. So you better have a certain list of things that you do to verify that you discovered and disclosed. But for the most part, you're going to rely on what the seller discloses, right? Unless you see significant red flags. Otherwise, you see signs of the water line on the wall in the basement. What's going on with that? Do you have a recurring water problem? Now you're getting into things, or maybe it's a freshly painted basement. Nice, new white paint. Kills that covers stains. Cans are sitting over in the corner. That might be a time for you to put two and two together and say, okay, did you fix the thing that you painted over, or do we still have a problem? Because when it comes to things like that, where a seller is like covering over things, they could end up actually, doesn't matter about no representation. If it's determined that it's a latent defect, where they went to great lengths to hide a problem, where the buyer had no reasonable expectation to discover it by hiring a professional inspector, then that seller could end up being in trouble after the fact. So this is a good time to avoid those sorts of future problems. It's also a time that you're going to ask the seller this question: why did you buy the house? What do I need to point out to potential buyers? The reasons that you bought it might be the reason they want to buy it. And what would you, what sorts of improvements have you done? Did you get a permit for those improvements? By the way, what do you want to leave with the house? Washer, dryer, refrigerator. Those are all personal property. Do you want us to leave them out of convenience because they're old and you want nice, new, fresh ones that match your new stuff? Or do you want to leave them out, not include them, so therefore they become negotiable items? That might be the better route. Just depends on what their goals are. But this is the point of this meeting, is to find out what their goals are. You could certainly show up, and we'll take a break here in just a second. Oops. Might be a good time. Let me finish this statement. You could certainly show up and do your entire presentation with a lovely PowerPoint on an iPad or a Mac or some sort of tablet. You could also have a printed version where you have this entire little flip book. You could have all of those things so that you're ready no matter what kind of person you're dealing with, because your presentation with a person kind of depends on the person. Don't just come in there with a whole bunch of stuff. You're going to make some people, some certain personality types, their eyes will glaze over and they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be here forever. You ever see that? You're that person. You're like, I don't want a 4-hour presentation. Just get to the point. Are you the kind of personality type? Just tell me what I need to know so I can make a decision. That's its own little personality type. And you better not force them through this long presentation. You'll lose them. They'll hire the other agent who didn't put them through that torture. My favorite listing appointment prop is not a laptop. It's not a tablet. It is a blank piece of paper, maybe a pad. I set it on the desk and I have a chat with them. And I say things like, okay, what's important to you for this move? Why are you moving? What are you worried about? What did you experience the last time you went through this? And what did you like about it? And what did you not like about it? What am I doing? I'm asking them to tell me what the answers need to be so that I can take advantage of them? No. So that I can give them the product that they want. They're hiring me as a person, but why not tailor make the solution to suit their needs? Oh, this is a person who's like an accountant type C, much detail, need all the little specs. Okay, great. Then I'll maybe pull out my tablet from the bag because I do have it ready. I just didn't want to scare them with it until I was sure they're the ones who needed to see it. Now let's show it to them, because I've discovered through the walkthrough, through the conversation, through the building of rapport, that this is a person who needs the details. So now let's share it with them. And now they love me because I'm giving them what they want. Oh, different than that, I find out through the walkthrough, through the little bit of a conversation, that they're just like, you know what? I'm stressed about all the details. If I could just hire, my dream agent would be somebody that just handled it for me. I trusted them enough to just let them just tell me the 2 choices I have so that I can make a decision. I am not going to put that person through a 2-hour presentation. I'm going to say, well, here it is. If you want to sell it fast, it's probably going to sell for this. If you want to sell it, squeeze the most you can out of it, it's probably going to sell for this. I'll take care of the rest. Here's where you sign. That might be all you need to do. But you didn't know that because you didn't ask the question, unless you did, right? You got to ask questions. Let's come back in 10. I'll see you.
That you're watching. See me play live.
righty, welcome back as we knock out this last 45 minutes. We just talked about the pre-listing meeting. On that meeting, we're going to discuss with them the amazing things we do to get the property sold, the reason they're hiring us instead of those other 82,000 agents they could have picked from across the state. We're going to talk to them about our marketing plan, maybe what we charge, right? Maybe that's flexible. Maybe you say, well, what do you want to accomplish? Oh, and I'm going to help you sell it, but is there something you need to buy? Because that might affect what you charge on them selling, right? You might be a little more able to come down and charge them less to list if you're going to make something on the purchase side, because quite often when you help somebody buy, they don't have to come out of pocket to pay you. And why not? Why not have an agent looking out for their best interest that they don't really have to pay? So that's the point at which you will talk about your plan, your commission percentages. You might, maybe they'll say, well, how much should we give to a buyer agent? Then you might show them, I like to, when it comes down to the valuation, the figuring out what it probably will sell for and what the condition should be. How good do I need to make this house anyway? It's a seller's market. Do I have to do anything to fix it up? Maybe the answer is not much. But what I like to do is make them kind of see it for themselves. So I'll show them the comparables printed out or on a screen, and I'll just let them see 3, 5, 10 of the competition that has sold, and I'll show them the inside photos. And they might realize, oh, wow, so they got 380, but man, they had new paint. I've got every room a different color for the last 10 years. They have neutral gray throughout. They start coming to the conclusions, and you don't really have to be the bad guy. They can figure it out for themselves. They might say, well, does that matter all that much? And you say, well, you noticed it, right? Probably going to help your cause to present a product to potential buyers that they don't have to do any work on. Sure, it's a seller's market. Sure, people don't have much to pick from, but it's still the case that the best ones sell fastest and for more. So what's your situation? Do you have the time, effort, money, ability to get it done? Then maybe it's something you want to pursue. Just gets that conversation started, right? We know this already. When they ask this inevitable question, not what you charge, but what's the standard rate? We do not give a standard rate. There is no standard rate. It is negotiable. We can't set commissions as an industry. We can certainly set them as a firm or as a broker. Your firm could say we charge at least 5%, but you choose to charge 6 or 7. If you do everything under the sun and pay all this money up front, a couple $1,000 for every listing, that's not unusual. It's not impossible for certain price points, certain things that you might do because you have so many things that you do. Then maybe you do. Maybe you are worth more than what they're prepared to hear you say, right? Maybe you get it because you deserve it, because you have a reputation. They're talking to you because you were referred to them, because maybe it's your specialty. All that could be possible too. Okay, the buyer side. We're going to talk to them about the split. We're going to say, look, here's what we're charging you, and we're going to split it with the selling firm representing the buyer in a certain way. When it's a buyer agent, that's what we're looking at here. The bottom of the first page of the buyer agency agreement, it says, firm shall seek the fee from the listing firm, but if that's not enough money, we're going to ask you, the buyer, to pay the difference. There is also a place on the buyer agency agreement to charge a retainer fee. You could do that on both, by the way. You could charge a welcome to me. I charge $500 to start working with me, if you can get away with it, right? And if you have enough reputation, a good enough reputation and success track record, maybe you do. There are some brokers that charge that, especially on the listing side, because you do have an upfront initial outlay of money for a lot of these various things to get the marketing started. So the retainer fee is certainly optional. It'd be something basically you're charging fee for services or an upfront to start working with me. I charge this, and then a success fee. Fee would be what you're getting paid at closing, the full rest of the commission. Might be that you charge a $500 or $1,000 retainer fee, and then that comes off of the total commission at the end, right? It's totally flexible. I don't see it a lot. I haven't heard about it happening a lot, except maybe in certain price points, certain markets, and by agents who have kind of already established sort of a name for themselves, a reputation. Okay, a co-brokerage sale. When we have fees being split, we have the purple house in the middle, the seller selling that house, that purple roof line right there. The sale price is $400,000. That seller has agreed to pay the listing firm 6% total commission. From that 6% commission, it's going to be split between the listing firm and the selling firm, firm A and firm B, right? So the money is flowing in this direction. Seller pays the total of $24,000 in commission. Of that commission, in this case, it's an even split. So they've chosen, the listing firm and the seller have chosen to share evenly with the other cooperating brokerage firm. So the listing firm is going to get a $12,000 check from the closing attorney, and so is the selling firm. And those brokers are going to get those checks, take them back to their offices, and then have their split taken from there. That's a co-brokerage sale. Co-brokered, two different firms, firm A and firm B. An in-house sale looks like this. Same firm, only one firm involved, right? The total commission is $24,000 in this case. The seller's broker and the buyer's broker, they're each getting something, and they are splitting with the firm as well. Same firm, but it's basically one firm, two brokers. It might be that the seller's broker has been around a long time. Maybe that particular firm starts everybody on a 50% split, and then you earn upwards from there. You hit a certain amount called a cap. Maybe you earn $18,000, and then for every $2,000 or $3,000 more you earn after that, your split goes up 2 or 3 or 4%. And so the seller's broker has been around, done the business so successfully that they are up to like a 90% split. But the buyer's broker, who works for the same firm, is brand new and is on a 50% split. So you could have the same two brokers within the same firm making vastly different amounts depending on their splits because of various things. Let's get into different types of listing agreements, but first let's take a look here. Broker Betty is on a listing appointment with seller Sam. Sam tells Betty that the roof has leaked in the past and that Sam had the leak repaired. At an open house, a potential buyer asks about structural issues, and Broker Betty says there are no issues. Broker Betty could be found guilty of, since I have it showing to you, negligent omission. She knew that the roof had leaked in the past. She was told that he had the leak repaired. She didn't get any proof of that. She should have checked. She was negligent by not checking. And she said there are no issues. But you know what? I'm going to revisit this one. I'm not too happy with this one. Let me bring that back tomorrow and I'll talk about this one again. Here are the types of listing agreements. First of all, the one that we do is this one, the exclusive right to sell. There are three. There's the exclusive right to sell. There's an exclusive agency listing agreement, and there's the open listing agreement. Now, I'll take some time and go through each of them. We don't do this one here. An open listing agreement says that the seller can list with lots of different firms, and whichever firm brings the buyer is the one that gets paid. I've heard, I don't know for sure, but I think in England, that's how they do it. When you list your house, you can list and you'll see a house for sale with like 5 different signs in the yard. And whichever of those brokers ends up being the reason it sold is the one that gets paid, and the rest of them don't get anything. So in an open listing contract, the seller can list with lots of different firms, but only the firm bringing the buyer gets paid. We don't do it that way, and I'm glad. I wouldn't want to do it that way. The owner themselves could find the buyer themselves, and if the owner brings the buyer and it's not because of an agent or a firm, then they don't owe a commission at all. So this is the best way for an owner, right? A seller is going to like this way the most. There's no risk. They might even have a shot at not paying the commission, but still having all the different firms promoting their property for them. So we don't do it that way. Here's the one called exclusive agency. This one says if the seller finds the buyer himself, he does not owe a commission. But if the listing firm brings the buyer or another firm comes along with the buyer, then the seller has to pay a commission, has to pay the commission to the firms, right? But there's still a chance with an exclusive agency listing that the seller could say, you know what? I work an hour away from where I live. I've listed my house with an exclusive agency agreement. I made a flyer all by myself, and I took it to work an hour away and stuck it on the bulletin board in the conference room, in the kitchen or whatever, break room. And a buyer, a coworker of mine, found that flyer. They want to buy it. In other words, there's no way that particular buyer who ended up buying it had anything to do with finding it because of the brokers. In that case, the seller could say, look, broker, thanks for your time and effort and those pictures you took, but I found the buyer myself. It had nothing to do with you. Therefore, I don't owe you anything. You can just get your stuff and go. I'm going to sell it to my buyer that I found by myself at my work, right? So a exclusive agency agreement, listing agreement says if a broker is involved, the seller owes a commission. If the seller found the buyer themselves, the seller does not owe a commission. Well, what about if that broker put the house on the market, paid a couple $1,000s on this and that and the other and pictures and took their time, and it took 2 or 3 months of trying like this before finally the seller found their own buyer, and now that broker's out in the cold? That doesn't sound like a fun business model. That's where this one comes in. Let's do it this way. This one protects the broker the most thoroughly, because even if the seller finds their own buyer that the broker had no chance of ever finding, but the seller finds them themselves, the broker is still due the commission. Seller is still agreeing to pay the broker, because you know what? It's more than finding the buyer. So yeah, okay, even if the seller finds their own buyer, the listing broker still needs to do stuff. They still need to help that buyer get the forms they need and fill them out, even if they're not a dual agent. They're just as still going to be the seller's agent only, and it's going to be an unrepresented buyer that the seller found. The broker still has to do work, so it's kind of more fair for what's most likely to happen. One firm gets to list it. Commission is being paid no matter who brings the buyer, even if it's the owner. Total protection for that firm. So between this one and this one, what's the big difference between an exclusive right and an exclusive agency? Yeah. Which one allows for the seller to get out of paying the commission? Yes. Yeah, that's it. Here's how it looks. Exclusive agency, one firm. Seller can still sell it themselves and not owe it. The exclusive right to sell, one firm's listed it, but it might be that even if the seller finds the buyer themselves, firm still gets paid. There's something called a protection agreement. In the unrepresented seller disclosure and fee agreement, which is basically the FSBO document. You've got a buyer that wants to buy a for sale by owner. You go talk to that for sale by owner as a broker. You say, look, don't tell me anything you don't want the buyer to know, but I'm here to make this process easier, and I'm representing the buyer. You are unrepresented as you decided you wanted to be. But a protection agreement makes sure that you get paid. It says, hey, for sale by owner, will you pay me a buyer agency fee? And if they are willing to do so, the protection agreement protects you, gives you that fee. It's the document that says, look, I'm not listing your property for you, but you're agreeing to pay me a fee. Why would a seller pay that fee? In order to sell it to that buyer, because with that buyer comes the broker. They can't have that buyer without that broker. And if that broker has a buyer agency agreement with that buyer, it's a package deal. That seller could say, look, I don't care what your fee is. I'll pay it as long as I still get my bottom line number that I want. Right? That's usually the way you can explain it to them. Look, Mr. Seller, my fee is just going to be rolled on top of the number that you're happy with. It still needs to appraise for the sale price, but we just roll my fee into the transaction. Occasionally, you might have a seller that says, I don't care. It's the principle of the thing. I'm not paying your commission. Okay, fine. Well, if your buyer can afford to pay it as a line item figure separate from the sale price of the house, then don't have a problem. But usually, many times, especially if the buyer is getting financed, they need to roll the commission into the price. And you just need to get good at explaining to a seller, look, I don't represent you. I represent my buyer. If you want to sell to my buyer, let me show you what your net figure would be. How much are you going to walk away with after you pay my commission, the reduced commission, by the way. I'm not listing with you. Therefore, I'm not charging you what I would charge to list your house. It's 2.5%, 3%, 2%, 1%, whatever. If I can just show you what you're going to walk away with, is that something you might entertain? And as long as they get their magic number, they probably won't care. It's protecting your commission. It doesn't create an agency agreement. You don't owe them anything more than the bare bones minimum disclosure and reasonable skill and care. Here's that limited service brokerage model we talked about. We don't call it discount. It's called limited services. You are limiting what you're giving to them, but you can't limit your agency responsibilities. If all they want from you is to put it in the MLS and you'll charge them $500 plus a buyer agency commission to put it in the MLS, then they need to pay whatever you guys agree for a buyer agency commission so that you can attract brokers to bring buyers for it. And then they'll pay you that flat fee to put it in the MLS and nothing else. You're not doing anything. They're handling the negotiations, the offers. If there's some sort of problem, you might still need to step in. But for the most part, they're getting what they're paying for. You don't handle showings or negotiations. They're going to ask advice from what's going to happen in a limited service, as happened in mine that I told you about. That broker who's representing the other party is probably going to have to do more work because you, the limited service listing broker, you got paid a lower amount for a limited amount. Therefore, if issues come up, for the most part, the procedure kind of going to rest on that other broker to get through most of that stuff. What you cannot do in anything, especially this, is act like a dual agent if you're not one. Can't create this thing called undisclosed dual agency. That's illegal. We know about the MLS. It's the thing that shares all the listing data, shows what your houses are for sale, gives you access to others with confidence that you're going to get paid if you bring a buyer for those other listings. And it gives you nice statistics to use to show what things have sold for, to figure out what things are worth, and to help your buyers find something to buy. But by belonging to the MLS, you're telling everybody, I will follow the rules of the MLS. I will pay a commission to brokers bringing buyers for my listings. Whatever I've said here on the sheet at the bottom of the page that I say I'll pay is what I'll pay you. You can feel confident that that's going to happen for sure, because I've already signed the member subscription agreement back when I joined it. I'm agreeing to pay people if they bring a buyer for my listing. We're going to cooperate and compensate each other, right? What's the biggest advantage of the MLS? Why do people put their listings on the MLS? Not that kind of exposure, but this kind of exposure, right? Getting it out there to the world, making sure people see it. Yeah, they could stick a sign in the yard, but the people who drive by are going to be the ones who see it. They could put it on Facebook even, but are people going on Facebook to see listings for sale? Sometimes, but not as many as who go to the MLS. That's a very intentional, specific, niched down service. Also, by the way, the MLS includes the option to give permission to them to share all of that data with other websites like Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.all, you name it, a million. In fact, even other brokers. We signed this thing called an Internet Data Exchange or IDX agreement. You don't need to know this for the test. That says, yes, we're going to allow our listing data to go out to all these other. So my listing information could show up on my competitor's website. And I'm okay with that. I happen to be, because it's going to get more exposure for my listing, right? What else do we do with the MLS? All this stuff. It's great for these stats. It's something that we can have this huge database of what has sold, what is currently for sale, what's in the under contract period, what never sold, it expired without selling, because all listing agreements have to have an expiration date. And you better believe those people in that expired category, 3 lines down there from the bottom, they get calls as soon as their listing expires from the MLS. They get calls from ambitious real estate agents who are calling them and saying, I see that you failed to sell your house. Let me show you what I can do to succeed this time. They might say it a little differently, but that's kind of what they're saying. And then sometimes people just need to take a break temporarily off the market. Sometimes they withdraw the listing altogether. All of that shows up. You can search for all of those things. We saw a sheet together. This is here just to kind of show you the rough layout. I'm not trying to show you all the details here, but it's got everything from the type of pipes to the remarks section at the bottom. That big paragraph might show that it's brand new granite countertops or it's been completely painted inside and out. Might not show anything. If the remarks section has nothing, then it's probably a pretty basic house that doesn't have any updates, upgrades, anything like that. That middle section talks about the mechanicals or things like fenced yard, type of siding. The top section is the price and location and legal description. The part near the picture is like square footage, heated living area, as opposed to basement versus garage, bedrooms, bathrooms. Oh, and can't really tell here, but it talks about the type of allowable financing. Seller might not want to sell it to a buyer who can only use FHA loan or VA loan money. They might only want to sell it to a buyer that's going to use either cash or a conventional loan. We'll get into that in 14 and 15 as to why a conventional loan buyer is stronger perhaps than an FHA or VA buyer, or at least has more of a chance of success in certain markets. Our poor FHA, VA buyers took a beating these last couple of years because people didn't have to pick them. And the thing about an FHA buyer is the FHA appraisal is harder, stricter. So that house, if it's got an older roof for some reason that we think the appraiser might not like how the condition is not perfect or good enough, that might keep them from allowing the FHA loan. And a seller frequently would say, I don't even want to go there. My roof is kind of old, so I don't want to even sell to an FHA buyer because I don't want to have to deal with the strict FHA appraisal. So we'll get more into that later. Who's responsible for the accuracy? The listing broker. It is up to us to make sure that information is in there properly. We might not do it ourselves. We might hire someone else to put the information in, but we're still responsible. Who's responsible? The broker. Listing broker is responsible for the accuracy in the MLS, including the square footage. We're going to go through the yellow square footage guidelines book at some point, and that is going to teach us how to measure a house. Basically, what are the nuances? What are we obligated to report when it comes to measuring? There it is. Listing firm and listing licensee are responsible for the MLS data. The contracts. Let's look at the paperwork. Same thing. Well, this is no surprise. We know this already. When to disclose how agency works, the relationship at that thing called first substantial contact. And we use this paperwork in order to do that. The working with agents disclosure. And part of that discussion is, hey, here's this thing called dual agency. Do you want to let me do it or not? Right? Here's how that works. And then you go from there. Once you've discussed this, now you know what they're going to allow you to do. Now you pull this out, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. I think it's about 11 or 12 pages now. And it spells out what you're going to do, what they're going to authorize you to do in terms of exposure. Will they let you advertise on the internet, off of the internet, do an open house, put up a yard sign, put on a lockbox? How much to pay the other broker? How much to pay if they're a buyer agent versus a seller sub agent? What kind of financing you're going to allow? The seller's willing to sell to an FHA, VA, conventional, or cash only? What sorts of things are in this listing agreement? I'll have that in the Dropbox, or sorry, the Google Drive for you this week. It's got to have the names of the parties. No surprise. Got to have the terms, things I just mentioned. The legal description. You better be listing the right property, right? Don't just have a street address. It needs to have the actual legal description. Some version of one of the three methods. What are you listing it for? That gets into the conversation of strategy. How do you know what to ask? Is it based on what it's probably going to sell for? Yeah, some way, but sometimes you put more cushion over the sale price you expect it to sell for than others. Sometimes you don't put any cushion. Might be better just to price it where you think it's going to sell, because that's going to get more people excited and more inclined to make multiple offers. Or like the last couple of years, you figure out kind of what you're expecting and then you put something higher. You round up. It just depends on the market. What you're charging, that's going to be in there because this is where that's located. Well, where do we not put the brokerage fee? We don't put it in the contract. We put it here in the listing agreement. A protection clause says, look, seller, if you list with me and it doesn't end up selling and it either expires or we agree to let you out, if you end up selling it to somebody that came as the result of my efforts while I was your listing broker, then I still am due the commission within this many days. So fill in the blank. I usually put 120. One time I put like 60 days and somebody challenged me on it and said, would you do it for less? And ever since then, I've put a huge number on it and I've never had that problem again in 20 years. Not a huge deal unless they're trying to get you to let them out of the listing so that they can go behind your back and sell it without paying you a commission. I did have that happen once. Somebody actually said, we don't want to sell anymore. Somehow they kind of knew the buyer. It was a buyer that came without an agent. And so they actually knew the buyer, got a hold of their contact info, and they told me they were going to take a break and not sell. And on the very day I was driving there to pick up my sign and lockbox, a random appraiser called me out of the blue and said, I was scheduled to appraise this property, your listing. He didn't know. All he knew was that I showed up as the listing agent. He didn't know I had been freshly kind of fired. I didn't know. They were just asking me to let him out, and I did because they were actually friends, sort of acquaintances. Come to find out, what they were doing was trying to go around my commission. Tell me they didn't want to sell and end up selling to that exact buyer I had just been introduced them to last week, and the appraiser told on them. So people are capable of quite a bit of stuff. That protection clause is in place, so I could say, look, you sold it to somebody that came because I listed your house, and you're trying to sell it to them. I could have sued them. I could have pursued them for the commission within some amount of days that I filled in the blank. And I let it go. I regret that I let it go. But in the moment, I just didn't bother to pursue it. I had enough going on that I'm like, I don't even want to go through the hassle. Now, I don't know. I guess I'm older and meaner, and I might have just tried to spin the wheel and see what happened. But I just didn't have the energy because I had other things. I had business to pursue. And so I probably should have. It'd have been for a better story if I'd have gone after him. I could have probably at least bluffed and scared him into doing the right thing and getting me back in it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking at the time too, Greg. And again, it's sort of like an abundance versus a non-abundance mindset. What would you do if you had so much business coming in that it wasn't a big deal? I like to kind of think in those terms rather than the opposite. If you're holding on too hard on every little thing, white knuckling it, you sometimes start to make poor decisions, and people see the desperation, and it's usually just a bad energy thing all around. Commission sharing with other firms is spelled out in that listing agreement too. That's where we're going to say, look, we either are or we're going to not pay a buyer agent, or how much are we going to pay them. Brokerage fees, 100% commission for the most part. I think there's some models being experimented with. I think like maybe Redfin is talking, if they're not already doing it, talking about maybe like maybe even a salary arrangement for a broker, but that's pretty rare. By far, you're making a percentage of the sale price, and that requires a license. It's a percentage of the gross sale price. So $100,000 sale price, 5% commission, the total commission is $5,000. And you might be splitting that, right, with the agent that brought the buyer, the firm that brought the buyer. It could also be this, though. It could just be a flat fee. Put it in the MLS for X dollars. It could be this. This one's a little precarious. This one has some room for misbehavior, because what this is saying is the seller is telling you, look, I don't care what you sell it for. As long as I get $100,000, whatever over that you sell it for, you can keep. And if you feel confident you're going to sell it for 110, 15, 120,000, and you're happy with that, that might be a good deal for you. However, what if you know that it's probably worth 150 and you only tell them it's worth 100 because you're angling to get the $50,000 commission? There's too much room, right, for some agent to maybe not be fully disclosure driven, right? Firm keeps an amount above the seller's desired net. It's just a little sketchy potentially. Firm's duties: promote it, advertise it, show it. It's going to be spelled out in the listing agreement. Here's what you expect. It might also be spelled out in your marketing material. Here's what we do. And give the seller advice along the way. Obviously, they're calling the shots. It's like you own the boat. I'm just driving it with your input and goals, right? So I'm not going to do anything, make any decisions without running it by you. But there's a lot involved. It's more than finding the buyer. There's a whole lot from the under contract day all the way to the closing day. I kind of laugh at the concept of a job description in this business. To me, the job description is get them to closing, because nobody gets paid until we have a closing. And I've done a lot in the interest of getting them to closing. I've mowed grass. I've hired somebody else to mow grass. It depends on how much time you have to work with. It's been a long time I've done any of that, but I've done some cleaning. I've done some painting. It's like if something's important to the parties and nobody wants to come out of pocket, sometimes they look to the broker to come out of pocket. Maybe you hire that thing, even though it's not your official job to do so, your responsibility, you shouldn't have to. Well, is anybody else going to do it? Are you letting this $500 warranty that somebody just decided they want stand in the way of you making $18,000 commission? I'll buy 10 $500. Yeah, I'd buy 10 $500 warranties to make $18,000. I'm okay with 13, right? That's not something that would probably happen. But point is, there's kind of no job description. It's more of a, let's just get it to work, right? Let's make it happen. We give them advice on what to expect with, like, how much is due diligence money? How much is earnest money? What's the norm? What should I be used to? And that was a big adjustment over these last few years because, gosh, maybe 8 years ago, my standard answer when somebody said, how much should I write the check for, due diligence and earnest money? Back then, my answer was about 1% of the sale price, because that was true. As we would see due diligence and earnest money on any transaction, it would probably be about like that combined. Both of them together was probably not more than 1% of the sale price. Boy, that changed. As the market got competitive, it just went crazy out of control. So I don't give that advice anymore. It depends. My answer now is, how bad do you want it? How much should that be? How bad do you want it? Are you completely burnt out because you lost 3 in a row? Then let's go ahead and make some commitments. How much work are we worried it might need? Is it work that you're unable or unwilling to do and you want it really bad? Then go ahead and commit. Write a big fat check. Let's beat out these people and move on with life and get this thing instead of losing another one, right? Or if you don't care, then I don't care. I want what you want. We'll try it again. We'll lowball, even though I don't think it's going to work. Maybe I'm going to do what the client wants me to do, as long as it's lawful, legal. And disclosure. We owe everybody disclosure. We saw this already, even just today. Need to have this language in all agency agreements. We don't care what anybody looks like, believes in, where they came from. Real estate should be fair and accessible to everybody, no matter what, regardless of these 7 federally protected classes and then 2 more added on from the realtor membership. This is a two-way street. Don't forget, they can't just fire us and we can't fire them. We would have to let them, it's up to us, it's up to the firm, I should say, to let them out of the agreement if it wants to. And it's up to them to let us out if they want to. So they have duties and responsibilities just like we do. Part of those duties are to make it available for showings. Sometimes that's more difficult than others because maybe they're renting it out and that tenant has nothing to win. They have no advantage in helping this thing get sold. It just means they're going to have to go find another place to rent sooner. So sometimes tenants can be a real obstacle. And you have to explain and find out what's going on. Tell that seller, look, oh, it's a tenant. How bad do they not want to leave? Maybe you want to pay them to leave. I'd rather it be a vacant house than a tenant occupied house if it's going to be a difficult situation, right? I don't care for vacant listings just because they never show as well. But if it's a sabotage situation where somebody constantly doesn't allow the showing because of all manner of reasons, I'd rather it be easier to show. So sometimes it's not the seller's fault, but they need to fix it. Keep it presentable. That's when you have that discussion about staging. Here's what we're going to do to make it show its best. And we're still, even though it's a seller's market, staging is still important. Staging meaning, let's get the beds made. Let's maybe even move the bed. Your teenager has that bed pushed into the corner because it gives them more floor space, but that doesn't make the room show well. For our time together trying to get it sold, let's pull that bed out, maybe flip it to this wall right dead center, take out some stuff, put them in boxes, throw it in the garage so the room shows bigger, all that fun stuff. All the stuff you see on HGTV. And sometimes you need to not be the bad guy. So it's worth it to pay a staging company to give them that sort of bad news instead of you. They might take it better if it's somebody that has the word staging on their business card. Or if they trust you, if they think you know what you're doing, you might just have that relationship. You can say, look, guys, you just need to do this. Trust me. To get this sold for the most money, let's make this look like something ready to be sold. Yes, you had it painted mustard yellow throughout, and that's wonderful. Good for you. But now you've entrusted me with this thing, and now it is an asset, needs to be converted to cash. Therefore, let's make it appealing to the vast pool of potential buyers. So let's turn it into that. It's no longer your home. It's an asset. So let's paint it. Think we should paint? Yeah. Because remember those 13 that are on the market alongside yours? All of them were Joanna Gaines, agreeable gray. You need to join the club, right? It's just going to slow you down. The longer you take to sell because of little things like that, the lower you're probably going to end up selling for. Because the longer it sits on the market, the more a buyer assumes something worse is wrong with it than what probably really even is. Keep it presentable. Documents. Seller should be giving you the documents you need. Cooperate with the agents and then pay that commission as promised. Listing agreement has some provisions in it. There might be a warranty. Maybe the property has got some age on it. And so it would help the potential buyers to feel better about how old and maybe out of shape it is to have an included warranty. Hey, seller, let's go ahead and advertise that you're going to provide a 1-year warranty for the buyer at your expense, not theirs. A warranty might be anywhere from $600 to $1,000+. In the grand scheme of things, if it accomplishes a goal of keeping them from worrying about the fact that the appliances aren't brand new, worth it. I would even pay for it myself, but I'm going to try to get them to provide it before I'm going to offer. If it really becomes an issue, I'm not going to let it hold up a deal, but I'm not going to just throw money at it unless I very much absolutely have to. Earnest money. We talked to them about what earnest money looks like and if there is a dispute between the parties. We go under contract, for instance, if the buyer and seller agree to not do this, the buyer walks away and the seller refuses to give them back their earnest money, they could do that. The seller could refuse, even though it's spelled out that they're supposed to give it back to them. If there's a dispute, whoever's holding the earnest money cannot release it until that dispute is cleared up and both parties agree in writing. Okay, yeah, we're going to split it. I'm not going to give it all back to the buyer, but I'm going to give half of it back. And if the buyer's okay with it, so be it. Or 100% on one side or the other, whatever. Now's when you talk about those sorts of things. Of course, the dual agency conversation. Do you even offer it? Here's how we're going to do it. Material facts. You owe everybody all of that. Just talk about that disclosure stuff. The chandelier on the left, that's a reminder to talk about fixtures. Fixtures versus personal property. Do you want to include the refrigerator in the sale because you don't want to hassle with getting rid of it yourself separately? And maybe it's a sales point. We could just a value add. Or maybe that fancy chandelier, you want to leave it in place, but you're taking it with you. We need to make sure we spell it out. Make sure that buyer knows you're not getting this chandelier. We're going to take it with us. We'll replace it with a item of similar function. But that's when, as a listing broker, I'm going to say, look, guys, let's just eliminate that possibility. Let's just go ahead and replace it so nobody is ever tempted by the big fancy one. All right, guys, we're on time here. Go ahead and put your name in the chat. I'll see you tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions about the practice exam that didn't occur to you tonight. And that's anytime, by the way. Have a good night. You too. You're welcome. okay, Keisha? Okay. Okay, good.